Hey guys, I'm the animated heroine, and this is another episode of On the Rack, and I have a guest here with me today. This is Colin. We're going to be doing this a little bit differently because I do have someone else here. It's going to be a little bit looser than normal. So normally the intro is not scripted, but the rest of the review is scripted. This time it's not going to be scripted. We're going to be taking notes while we watch the movie, but we're not gonna have an actual script that we're reading from. You can talk.
I know. Clearly.
The movie that we're going to be watching is B-Movie, and I've actually not seen this. Surprisingly, despite its well, not say famous, more like infamous with the internet, with its various YouTube videos and such. You have seen this?
In a bit of a stupor years ago, yeah.
Okay, so he's kind of seen this. I've heard interesting things. As usual, we're going to read the back. You want to read the back? You want me to read the back?
I can read it. Yeah.
Okay.
Apparently it is a hilarious honey of a movie. Everyone is buzzing for B-Movie, the hit comedy from creator and comic icon Jerry Seinfeld. Ambitious young worker Barry B. Benson soars out of the world with high-flying pollen jocks in search of nectar and adventure. But when he breaks one of the cardinal rules of Beedom and speaks to humans, Barry sets off on... I can't even read it. That's why. Unbelievable chain of events, because it's not a word. That proves even a little B can make a big difference.
All right, so we're going to be expecting a lot of B puns, I can already tell. Okay, so B-Movie. This is DreamWorks, so it's an hour and 30 minutes, so normal length. That's good at least.
In and out.
Yeah.
No Blade Runner here.
B-Movie is an A. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and shut off the recording, and we're going to watch it, and then we'll be back to share our findings and all of the, go over all of the things that are wrong with it. See you in a bit, guys.
Lately, when I'm staring out of my window, when I rest my head on my pillow, I just think of all the things that I need to be. You say that I gotta live up to your reasons. You're always coming up with new ones, and all these expectations are crashing down on me. But darling, can't you see? I may talk a little too much, I may get a little out of touch. I'm a little crazy and I'm not around enough. I may play a little too rough, I may get a little bit wound up. I'm a little lazy and I tend to interrupt. But lately I've been thinking that it's you that doesn't measure up.
I don't even know where to start with this one.
I don't even know if we watched B-Movie as much as we slugged through it, as we just dragged through B-Movie.
It did feel much, much longer than it actually was. It felt like I thought that the beginning felt sort of like standard bad movie.
Yeah.
But then it went to new weird levels of just...
I mean, for an hour and a half movie, this is the longest 4 hours I spent in an hour and a half movie. But yeah, the movie doesn't even... it doesn't stay on plot. It breaks the fourth wall numerous times. Mm-hmm.
It feels like a stream of consciousness almost.
A little bit.
I'm gonna eat chips while I do this. Like almost. I want to see the script for this, and I wonder how much of the script was just people in like a coffee shop or in an office saying, "And what about if this happens next?"
Right. Where it's like, so we'll start off writing like a movie about communism, and then it's like, well, what if they fell in love? It's like, or if I started, let's start with one movie, and then someone had the great idea of saying, well, what if it was a second movie, and then a third movie, and then a fourth movie?
All right, so before we go too much into the movie's flaws and stuff, normally I give a little bit of a summary of the film, but that's going to be difficult in this scenario because, as we just mentioned, it is sort of like a stream of consciousness. Like,
it's all over the place. Basically,
when it first starts out, it feels like DreamWorks' bad movie, where it's like
Right, you're right.
the anthropomorphized bees, where they have a society with tiny little cars, and they have their own newscasters and their own lawyers and all of that stuff. Basically, a miniature human society, which my thoughts about that have been stated on numerous occasions. Like, basically the Shark Tale
it's like
syndrome.
Like, how can we relate bees to people? Well, let's just make them like people.
Yeah, make them exactly like people. And then it takes sort of like the ants route, which is the better class of DreamWorks movie. Or more ants than A Bug's Life, because ants did that, where it was like everyone has their place and you have to work in that place, and basically where the characters are slaves and they're only allowed to do these certain things, but way better. Where and they don't have tiny cars, where it's actually
what
like
was better
a
about
society.
ants compared to this?
Well, it wasn't ridiculous for a start.
Yeah, I don't want to drag you down that hole, but it's
no, there aren't elements necessarily of. Well, first of all, Ants was about ants.
Okay.
Whereas, I mean, they had human-like qualities, but it was sort of like in A Bug's Life, where even though you have like little, we'll say, I don't know, here's a bar, for instance, an ant's bar, it's all made out of stuff that you would see in like a little ant society, rather than everything, the ants in relation to humans and the ants in relation to other bugs too. It's not like a weird society where everyone can talk and communicate. It's like,
some ants are probably throwing it up in each other's mouths, sort of thing. Like ants actually do.
It was more dramatic. It was less scrambled. It was also going for kind of that I don't know how to call it. The sort of making a statement. I don't even know if this movie was trying to make a statement.
This movie was making a lot. Well, let's just say it wasn't making a statement as much as just like more wild gesturing and meta, practicality.
Right. But it starts like that, sort of like a bad. Basically, it starts as a bad DreamWorks movie. I can tell why this is so popular on YouTube.
The alliteration alone. At 5 minutes in, like, you're just hearing the B word, a B word, so much in every sentence.
But the main character,
abysmal use of alliteration,
voiced by Seinfeld, doesn't want to basically make honey for the rest of his life, and decides to go outside and runs into this human woman, and then it turns into a weird love story for a bit, and then he discovers honey, and it turns into this big like court case movie for a bit. And then it goes into another weird direction, and another weird direction, and another weird direction. That's the best I can describe the plot, is it jumps around from idea to idea, and all of them are kind of, I don't know.
Yeah, it's like there's like no thought that's like, goodness, nothing seems to be thought through. Let's just say this and hope it's funny enough to get by. So we'll start with this like proto-communist society, and then this blue-eyed wunderkind bee who's never been outside, but he's well aware of like the outside world.
Yeah, like that's a confusing thing. So bees aren't allowed to interact with humans, but their society is essentially like.
I would think that like a hinge of the plot point, you would bring it up at least once. There's like just all these unspoken rules. Like it starts off with that text and that abbreviated where it's It's like, oh yeah, like most most people think bees can't fly because they're too fat. Like I don't like that's not a scientific thing.
Yeah, they have a quote. Is that even?
It's not. It cannot be a real quote. I can't say a scientist saying a bee is too fat to fly.
Bees' wings are too small for their bodies, so
Right.
technically they shouldn't fly. But bees, when have bees ever cared what humans thought? That's like the quote they start out with the movie, and it comes back.
Yeah,
it circles back into the end of the film, and it's like, what?
So yeah, is that the joke of the movie? Is there
I don't
this
know.
long? Because so that's suggesting that bees only fly out of spite, but then they have so it's they're also like, oh yeah, but we could also know how to talk to humans, but we won't talk to humans. They said we couldn't fly, so we're not going to talk to them. I don't.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
So before we get into specific things, which we're already talking about a lot of stuff that's wrong with it, but with this movie, it's going to be a bit scrambled because honestly, there were multiple times where I was watching this and just thinking, what is this?
Yeah.
What am I watching right now? A couple of things that are positive about the movie, if there are any, to start off with. Patrick Warburton. He was funny.
I think definitely a lot of the voice acting was pretty. Patrick Warburton, Larry Miller as the guy assigning the bees a job. He was like, he's dead, he's not dead. He's dead, he's not dead. So, I mean, essentially Jerry Seinfeld's friends who are comedians, so probably have a knack for timing.
A lot of them did not have material to work with, though.
Clearly.
I feel like Warburton, most of his lines weren't any good either, but his delivery was good.
Yeah. Even though he was just
Like,
screaming
even John Goodman. I love John Goodman. His character was just way over the top.
Maybe that's why Patrick Warburton is good, because like he's literally just screaming the whole movie, which is what my head's doing the whole time I'm watching it.
In an effort to keep some structure, let's go through specific things and then try to talk about those specific things before going on to other specific things. Yeah. So you start. What's one major thing about this movie that bothers you?
That bothers me? Well, I mean, as far as like as the tone or like the structure of the movie,
just in general, like if it's something like this movie, it goes all over the place. That's a thing.
Sure.
Or just straight bestiality. If that's, that's a thing.
You know, there's enough cartoon movies with bestiality at this point. I mean, this is just.
And then we'll talk about that, and then I'll mention one, and we'll mention them until we run out of things, and this might take a while.
Sure. I'd say just. The fact that it is all over the place. I didn't like the lack of consistency with the plot. I
lack of consistency is a big one, because one of the things that I noticed is the rules in this movie. I never know what the rules are.
They're breaking the fourth wall constantly, but then also it's adhering to like you have things like bee laws, which they didn't introduce, and then all of a sudden there's a bee Larry King that Jerry Seinfeld is saying. It's like, hey, there's a human Larry King. There is. Or he calls Larry King. He's like, he's really Jewish too. And then Barry's mom says, like, well, I hope she's bee-ish. So
yeah, so Jewish and bee-ish are two different things. Then he says, be Columbus, be Gandhi, and be Jesus.
Be Jesus, who was probably bee-ish.
So there's B Columbus, who I assume slaughtered millions of
other bees, like
bee Gandhi and
indigenous
bee
bees. Well, that's enough. Okay, well, I mean, again, I don't want to get too off topic. Too,
but one of the things, like in terms of structure and being all over the place, being.
Oh,
when the first point when Renee Zellweger
let's just call her Renee.
Renee's
I'm not even going to try
character.
with that last name anymore.
Meets Barry for the first time, she reacts in a semi-natural way towards him. Like, in a sense that she acts like she's, like, going crazy or dreaming, basically, where it's a weird thing. Yeah. And then suddenly, the very next person he talks to, just automatically seems to be aware, because it's that honey guy who's like aware that bees talk.
That's throughout the whole movie. There's like the pilots who freak out with seeing the bee, and then the air traffic controller is like, oh yeah, the bee. that we all know.
Yeah,
and love.
right. The pilots freak out when they see him and wind up getting knocked out. But then the air traffic control guys that he's talking to are aware of him because at this point there's been this whole big court case. Like, how does this work? How come the pilots are acting like a bee shouldn't talk, but the guys that are talking to them are acting like this is an established thing? Because this keeps going back and forth.
There is a goddamn court case. There's people outside. There's helicopters outside of which has never been a thing. Where they just like, where people's like, oh yeah, that monumental bee case. I think the lack of consistency also like what bothers me mixed with like, and I like Jerry Seinfeld. It's just like. It's like these like kind of half-finished jokes, and they're either like only punchlines or setups, but there's never like a thought-out joke the whole time, which makes me again think like, who is this movie for? Is this for people who know who Seinfeld is, who like observational humor, or is this for kids who will just clearly not get it?
I think that also would almost be in another category. So let's go ahead and ask that question then. Who is this movie for? Because at the start, it feels very much like just some silly B movie. But the further it goes on, the less and less it feels like it's for kids. Because I feel like Seinfeld's humor is obviously not for kids. But then we have a scenario where it's like, okay, if you like Seinfeld, and Seinfeld's great, but he's not being funny here because he's restricted to this terrible movie, which apparently you said he pitched.
Oh yeah, I'm guarantee he loves it. It's everything I read about it all seems like this is his little brainchild.
Okay, so you have this weird like amalgamation of Seinfeld in his humor with like the kid quality of like a children's movie about
I think
bees.
just the fact that it's a cartoon, that's what makes it confusing. It's like Who Framed Roger Rabbit's not really for kids, or Cool World's not for kids. It's adult
Cool
animation.
World's definitely not for kids.
But like it's clearly made for adults. This movie is made for kids, but with jokes that are like for adults.
Do you think this would have been a better movie if it were like a Sausage Party-esque type thing?
You know, I actually think so. You know, the best thing I liked about this movie, and I could probably watch it's like a very Seinfeldian thing when he's explaining to Renee that, oh yeah, well we can talk, and then they're going on a date. Like I would actually watch like a 40-minute version of a lady talking to a bee, and that was it. It was just a dialogue between the two, because like that's where it seemed to kind of shine, was like these
long ass conversations.
Yeah,
that just
it's like watching an episode of
into...
Seinfeld. It's just a banter. It's like, do you want salsa or something?
But
where you get honey from?
But that's not something that should be in a kids movie.
Oh no!
Because kids aren't going to enjoy that.
No,
kids aren't going to want to watch a lengthy court case.
It's like
about honey.
Yeah, it's like if like all these kids will like love Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, or A Few Good Men.
Which makes me wonder. Yeah.
12 Angry Men.
12 Angry Men.
A lot of dudes in courts.
I love that movie.
12
Angry Men is one of my favorite movies. Yeah, 12 Angry Men with bees.
Yeah. It's like, you know that famous kids book, Kill a Mockingbird? You know, that's just a giant court scene.
They had some weird references. I'll get into references in a second. But that makes me wonder if maybe the jumping around and the inconsistency was actually in an effort to keep kids interested. Because...
It's like, why watch a movie when you watch 4, 20-minute
because
episodes?
Otherwise it's weird, because it really does start pretty standard kid movie with just some strange dialogue and
you're really just kind of
that.
thrown into it,
and then it just goes completely off the rails. So I don't know who this movie is for, but it's
for us to tear apart. That's for sure.
So I just mentioned it. Weird references. Secret Life of Bees.
Yes. Yeah.
They killed Pooh. There was a drag queen joke.
That's right.
With the fake hive, it was like, that's your queen? That's a dude. That's a drag queen.
Side note, does that imply that, the the beekeepers, they had like a bee on the inside impersonate a queen. That's how they got all the bees to that.
Well, and that's the thing is we have no idea what the relationship with people and bees are.
I feel like we could talk for an hour about that. Like just how dubious and diabolical the beekeepers are.
Okay, yeah. That's another thing. So that's a new thing.
By the way, we are way off topic. You started so professional, and then I got way off.
That's all right. I expected it with this. So that's another thing. And another thing I brought up in the Ant Bully review was it's just sort of like, here's a depiction of a specific career that is then over-villainized. The beekeepers in this movie were, like, ridiculously over-the-top evil.
These people love their job so much
talking
that it's
conspiratorially.
Evil. Like, they make the honey, we get the money.
And
they're
at this
scraping
point,
off these big globs of honey, just smirking, looking at each other while they're doing it.
And at this point, there's no reason for us to believe that these people actually know that bees are, like, sentient creatures.
Yeah.
So it's just like, why are you so...
But then why have a fake queen, though?
But then that's
Did they know the whole time?
They could be. Who knows? I don't know. Maybe they do know the whole time. So one of the questions I had, and this is actually a little bit off topic, is... it goes in with the inconsistency stuff, is in the beginning of the movie when they're talking about how all bees have to do one specific job, and it's always about honey. And yet we have bee lawyers and bee newscasters.
Yeah.
And someone has to make those tiny cars and all of that stuff. So clearly
we'll
there
never see
are
again.
other jobs because they have a miniature economy of their own
Yeah.
similar to humanity. So why do people have to just go into bee making or honey making? Because that's one of those things where it's like the inconsistency of this movie where it's like, how does this work? What are the rules here?
Right, especially, and he even quotes is like when he's talking to Warburton in that weird cuckolding scene where he's like, "Oh yeah, I have trouble finding a job. I know." It's like, yeah, but we do have 100% like employment rate, but you don't because Barry doesn't have a job. He didn't want to get into honey. He's the only one. Like, are there like some weird like instance like sentinels or like weird.
They even have a Larry King. They have B. Larry King.
And B. Larry King would probably be writers and like people who like make sure that B. Larry King doesn't die.
Someone has to make those tiny glasses that they wear.
Right.
Someone has to make their tiny sweaters. Like some of the things, and I feel like it's for the sake of the jokes and logic goes out the window.
I mean, yeah, there's a suspension of disbelief as far as like...
Yeah, but there's a limit of suspension of disbelief. And it's just one of those things where it's like...
I think we cross it when there's a bee driving a fucking car. And
in certain... It's fun in creative situations, like, where you have... like Toy Story, where this is how the toy like universe works and the rules and all of that stuff, and you have these things established, and then you can like get into the story. With this, there is no establishing rules or anything, so it's just like a constant stream of jokes and like where the placement and relationships between the characters are constantly changing.
At any given moment, the bees and bee society is just like a blank joke used to fill in any gap of what, like, to comment on modern culture or any kind of culture. So like, oh yeah, we all here, let's make a B. Larry King thing. Let's make him also be communist and like in the army, and then like here's something about civil rights. Like,
and that's very DreamWorks.
Yeah.
It's very DreamWorks to just take a character that's like this. Let's make this movie about bees. Let's just put some random pop culture references in there. Where, environmental commentary.
Oh sure, I mean
go.
that's the denouement of the movie is.
Although it doesn't feel like, I mean, it takes a long time to get there.
Yeah. I asked you in the movie at the beginning, at the end of the movie, it's like, what the hell happened at the beginning for us to get to this point?
Yeah. It really does. It hits a lot of points.
I know what the answer
and it doesn't
is,
hit them well. But yeah,
it's a grim look on communism.
So we go from communism to environmentalism.
Yeah.
Where it eventually gets around to the thing where it really probably should have been about for the whole movie, and I think like and I don't even want to say talented writers, because I think Seinfeld's talented.
Yeah.
It's just something weird happened here.
I'm guessing a lot of, I get the feeling that a lot, like, it's jam-packed with celebrities and, like, other comedians, and I think that maybe they just wanted to get by on them just saying whatever they could alone, as opposed to...
Rather than actually trying to tell
Like, there's
a
no
story.
punchlines in them. It's just a bunch of quips and puns.
It is. There are.
Yeah.
I wrote down the quips at one point. But the environmentalism, eventually they get down to the fact that we need bees for, nature to exist. And because he wins the court case.
Yeah.
And then they get all the honey back from the grocery stores.
When they, maybe it is all about communism the whole time.
And
I'm sorry to
then-
interrupt. Go ahead.
Is it pro-communism?
Well, yeah, because
Because I think that's where it eventually goes.
oh, it definitely goes there. It starts off like everyone has a place, and like you are assigned a job,
And that's the...
and it works great until you get the one person who doesn't want to do it. He wants to take back the means of production, and assert like a weird like capitalistic vibe over it, where everyone just gets lazy and fat, and then
And
the
doesn't do
world
anything.
dies because of it until
And
until
then
all work
they
together
wind
again.
up going back to the norm,
Yeah.
basically. But that's a good point. If we're talking about communism,
This
and
movie's
it kind of is.
This movie's a retelling of the fall of the Berlin Wall.
where
what
it's basically
Russia post-
it then eventually says that okay, it was good all along. Hey, those beekeepers that seemed like villains,
Yeah.
they were actually doing the right thing, because we need to steal that
Those
honey.
dirty
Otherwise,
beekeepers.
bees are gonna get lazy. They're gonna get fat. They're gonna stop making honey,
Yeah.
and then the whole world's gonna die. And the time frame for this is so weird, because it's also not really like established. So one second they win the court case, the next second everything's dead.
Yeah, they make a joke, like the joke at the beginning is that bees don't live that long.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, 3 days in elementary school, 3 days in high school, 3
Right.
days in college, and now we're in the workforce. And
So
like for them to have a court
by that
case,
standard, then and I think trying to put logic into this is probably
we're well past that.
is probably a mistake. But by that standard, so 3 days in high school, so 3 days to them is the equivalent of like 4 years.
Yeah,
So
And I know this is also partly my
not much time could have possibly gone by.
but like a court case, I mean,
A court case.
if it was a real the court, especially if you're tackling. Like if they're saying that big honey is like big oil, that like litigation and like and jury selecting a lot like that would be a couple years.
we can allow for some, I think,
I don't know how
suspension
the
of
law works,
disbelief
so I'm
in
just saying
in a kid's movie, because I think in most movies we'll say a couple days.
Yeah,
A court case in movies usually takes like a couple days.
couple days. In and out.
So,
It's a very efficient system.
yeah,
go
which
in-
to the bees would essentially be like what, 2 or 3 years?
Yeah.
Anyways, how much time passes?
Yeah, how much time?
How
does
long does it take for the world to essentially die? Because it's not just that little area where he is; it's the whole world.
Yeah, No, there's a oh yeah. I think that what you're getting to is like the flowers die. How fast would flowers die
Without
worldwide
Without bees.
without bees? And like the last remaining flowers are just in the Rose Bowl.
Yeah. I mean, bees are definitely important. That's one of the things
Absolutely.
where, like, the environment will take a nosedive. Bee extinction is a major concern.
Yeah, I've seen that happening. I know what's up.
But, how fast did this happen? And also, is this just in this, like... So does his court case, was it for the entire world?
Well, apparently, but at the same time, other people aren't aware of it. Like a pilot doesn't know that bees can talk.
Yeah,
And then the
apparently-
air traffic controller is very versed in this big bee case.
Yeah, and that's weird.
Like I keep hearing a voice in my head saying, "It's like, why are you treating this kids movie so poorly?" It's like, well, one, I don't care, and two, it's like I don't think this is for kids.
No, and honestly, I never really put much stock in that argument because I've seen many kids movies that are really, really good.
Yeah.
And do actually, in fact, I would say a large portion of them, at least the well-made ones, do at least make an attempt to explain things a little bit or establish some
say
sort
any
of
good story
rules,
attempts to explain
right,
it.
in which the world they've
Call
created
me old-fashioned,
works.
Danny. But I love stories that explain the story.
And that's what half of my notes are, is just like questions like, why, what is this? And it started with like, bees have cars.
Yeah.
And then from there it's like,
Never see those cars again.
Well, and that's the thing, it's just sort of like, God, I wish the weirdest thing in this movie was that bees have cars.
I can only imagine that, again, which would make a lot of sense for how this movie was made, is that Jerry Seinfeld loves cars. And I was like, I bet you there was, I mean, I don't know, but I can imagine there was a scene where it's like, let's say the bee's driving a car, and then like they thought, it's like, why would they drive a car? Because like they could fly. It's like, yeah, but that's the funny part, because they don't need to. But then we'll never talk about it.
And that's the thing, is it right early on, like these tiny little weird things, I started to nitpick on, but then the further you get in the movie, it's like, I can't nitpick on the fact that bees have cars, because I'm watching a movie where a bee has taken humanity to court over taking their honey.
Yeah.
And the end of the movie...
It's weird when you say it out loud, right?
Right? And the movie ends with Renee and Barry having to fly a plane that gets struck by lightning and then winds up being flown by lots of bees holding it up and landing on a flower. Like, at this point, it's sort of like, I can't knock the movie for bee cars because it's gone to new levels of ridiculous.
You know, we've crossed many bridges to get to that point.
What, anything else?
Yeah, this is the full circle of the movie. I'm a communist. I don't...
Pro-communism. That's what we decided on. This movie is pro-communism.
Right. He ends up like the pollen jocks. Like, are they bad guys or good guys? Because he becomes one of them at the end.
I think they're good guys.
Yeah, it's like, but they're also like, but they're called like they're jocks, and they do like they're treated, or at least they're treating Barry at the beginning. It's like, hey, you think you can? They
were
hang
actually
out?
in terms of like being mean. They actually weren't
that
really
mean.
all that mean because they were like, let's mess with this guy, but then they did take him along. They're like, no, he's with us, and they were pretty pleasant.
I love
to
it when
him
that's.
entire
You think you're tough enough? You want to come with me? Okay, this is how you do it. And he's like, I'm actually going to be really helpful.
Although there was that one scene in the initial tennis scene where it's like, how do bees think tennis balls are flowers? And also,
I think they judge by the color. Like, they haven't seen something like that bright
How
before.
did Patrick Warburton hear that bee clearing his throat from off to the side of the court? But at this point, those were questions I was asking before the movie went crazy. So,
yeah, like if the first time you're hearing a bee, it's gonna make you stop. Like you're in New York, you're outside in New York City, and you hear a bee cough, and that messes up your day.
God, you know what's really infuriating is, like I said, I just got done Ant Bully was the last movie that I watched for On the Rack, and this movie makes Ant Boy look incredibly put together because it has rules.
Yeah.
Where, yes, the ants talk and the people talk, but the people can't hear the ants talk because they're too teeny tiny, and they can't hear them until they're that small.
Yeah, you know what? I guess like of all the glaring inaccuracies, the fact that a bee is just as loud as anything else around you.
But I think that's the greatest shame of this movie, is it makes me reconsider Ant Bully as
a potential.
It's still bad, but
yeah,
it's
it's like saying Back to the Future is a fun movie, but Primer's the better time travel movie, and Primer is punishing.
So yeah, I mean, I think we covered a vast majority of the problems. Obviously, some of the problems in this movie.
Let's see if there's anything
I mean, we could nitpick for it. We could talk about
there's nothing
this for
technically
several
wrong.
hours.
It's like, this movie exists. It technically exists, and
yeah.
I guess I don't have a problem with it. I feel like if I was like kind of...
I don't understand. Like, I feel like this is one of the few movies that, even from DreamWorks that I've seen, where I'm just sort of like, I don't understand how this is a thing. And that includes movies like Shark Tale.
Yeah.
Because with Shark Tale, when I see it, it's like, oh, this is like a weird marketing, pop culture, throw in the most popular actors kind of thing. With Home, that's what I see, is this is a marketable, throw in the most popular actors thing. With this movie, there's still a lot of really popular actors. But watching it, I'm like, I don't understand how this was made, because it's so completely, like, not even random in terms of, because the Madagascar movie is super random. This is on a whole new level. And so I can, like I said, I can understand why it's so popular.
Right.
Because watching it, it's like, this is in its own, like, spectrum of weird.
I would equate this, like, the very real reactions I have to this movie is tantamount to my experience to it. One, the first time I saw it, I was very drunk and it was on TV, and the next day I was just like, is that a movie about a bee and a lady? I don't, whatever. And like, it was just like a little blip in my head. It's like. And now, like, dead sober watching, I'm like, this is, like, painfully agonizing and claws across my brain. This movie creates...
And I've seen a lot of movies like that, but... Because I've seen a lot of movies like that.
I want to get drunk now to forget everything I just saw. Except for the Petra Warburton stuff. That was fantastic.
Yeah, no, he was good. But that's the weird thing about it, is that this movie, it just... Between the weirdly adult... dialogue, like, and I don't even mean like inappropriate, I mean just weirdly, this is Seinfeld with peas.
It just sounds like people talking, which it's a B movie about nothing.
Yeah. I mean, strictly speaking, the end school, I mean, obviously the main character winds up in a slightly different place, but in terms of the overall arc, things wind up pretty much exactly the same as they were in the beginning. So I guess it kind of is nothing and goes nowhere. I just don't understand why it was made.
I think someone just really wanted to get out their opinion. I think Jerry Seinfeld had a funny idea, and then there was some crazy writer who really wanted people to know that communism is still an answer.
I think that's as good an explanation for why it exists as any. All right, so I'm going to close it there. Thank you so much for...
Thank you for having me.
Watching B-Movie with me. I'm the Animated Heroine. This is Colin. Thanks for watching.